Well, thank you very much, Joe. I'm delighted to be here. I do know a number of people in the room, and I'm going to tell you that you guys out there are the real heroes who have, little by little, not let this issue go away, made it a bigger issue, made it yet a bigger issue, and I'm just delighted that we're all here. None of us are wearing orange jumpsuits. It's not in our color palette, right? Exactly. So it's not for lack of trying. I can tell you Jack Smith came after me personally. I ran a lot of the cyber teams during the 2020 Stop the Steal in DC, and I did write a bunch of affidavits, none of which were ever heard in a courtroom. But the point of all this is, it used to be when I gave this talk, the best people could do was dive in their purse for Valium or go out and have a martini, because it was kind of feeling hopeless. Today, it's not hopeless. Today, something has happened, and I think it's just the good Lord, frankly, who made it all come about. And it gives us an opportunity to now do something about what I'm going to tell you about today. But I want to clear up a lot of misconceptions, and for any of you who are maybe you're kind of on the fence as to exactly where the problems are, I think we're going to clear them all up for you. Now, it used to be,
and then it's ready.
It used to be that this talk was a very technical talk, and what I discovered is that doesn't work. People's eyes glaze over, they roll back, and so today, the way I do it is do y'all remember the old Walt Disney movies where Jiminy Cricket would be the narrator?
Yes.
And he would kind of set the stage. This was back, by the way, when Walt Disney writers knew that milk didn't come from a bull, and they knew that eggs don't come from a rooster. There's been a lot of confusion at Disney since then. But the point is that we're going to try to do it where I just act a little bit like Jiminy Cricket and introduce a lot of things, and then I'm going to let the machines actually talk to you. The machines themselves are going to testify today, and you're going to see what they have to tell you, because you don't need to take my word for it anymore. This is kind of fun. These were 4 cartoons that Dilbert ran, and these cartoons are why he got thrown out of every newspaper in the world. One of the most successful cartoonists around caught on very quickly to the idea that it was really the machines. And when he started writing cartoons about it, he was immediately blacklisted. Most of my videos, in fact, I think all of them that I did back in 2018, 2019, and 2020 are nowhere to be found. Few people captured them, but they don't exist by and large anymore. But today we're in a new day. So let's jump in and see what we can come do here. Let's look at some just basic facts. This is what the Democrat turnout was in 2012, 2016, 2020. Joe Biden never had more than a few hundred people at a rally, and now 2024. Can you possibly believe that? These happen to be the bellwether counties. These are called bellwether counties because these counties tend to predict with very high certainty who the winner was in each of these elections. 6% of them said Joe Biden won. You can't put this stuff together and not scratch your head and go, there's something very, very wrong here. And I want to give you a couple of perspectives to go into this. If you had a 401k and you were investing dollars into a publicly traded stock, that publicly traded stock has independent outside auditors. It also has a bunch of guys who are stock analysts. They're going to tell you whether or not they think the company is lying to you about their projections. And you're going to have the government, the SEC, and the DOJ. And together, all of them are going to try to safeguard a reasonable opportunity that you're not going to get defrauded and you could even have some profits. Now let's compare this with what happens in our voting system today. In the election system, there we are, but instead of dollars, we put in ballots. And instead of a publicly traded company, we put them into a computerized election system. So, do we have independent outside auditors? No. Do we have any independent watchdogs? No. Do we have the government? Well, we have CISA, which is the cyber, it's essentially they're the ones who are trying to give you cyber security out of the DHS. And most of these guys, I will tell you, I've talked to them, most of them at the Washington level are very, very, very left-wing people. And they have no qualms at all about lying to you directly to your face. Now, you do have people in Austin with CISA who are legitimate people, but they've all been threatened by the Washington crowd. Anyway, the government's position is, well, no, just trust us. And so the question is, can we? Because at the end of the day, it's this system that's going to tell you who runs your country for you. Second perspective, technology is not good or bad. There is no morality in technology, so to speak. It's just a tool. It's like a screwdriver, it's like a hammer, and you got to have the right tool for whatever job you're going to do. And what I want you to understand today, and what Joe talked about, is that there are so many vulnerabilities, and we're just going to hit the few high points. There are so many vulnerabilities in a computerized voting system, it is simply the wrong tool to vote with. The major problem is, in 2018, I ran a cyber intelligence firm, and we were a commercial firm. And I had a bunch of ex-three-letter agency guys who were just brutally good. A couple of them had shoeboxes full of passports. All of them were from different countries. All of them had their picture in them. None of them had their name in them. They've been all over the world for government doing things. And they were as good as it gets. We were not into the election system. And then some people brought us the logs from the Dallas County 2018 election. And what we saw was horrifying. In fact, I didn't even want to believe it. It took me a while to finally accept that what was in these logs was right. But with 2020, 2021, 2022, and now 2024, the evidence of widespread machine fraud is so vast, so many people are being exposed to it, that we've come to an interesting situation over the past 4 years. People say, well, we've still got the machines. We do still have the machines, but here's the big change. In 2020, we had to prove there was fraud. Today, public officials are beginning to realize they have to prove there's not fraud. And that's a huge shift. And it's because of people like you in the audience who have just said, wait a minute, this makes no sense. So officials can deny reality. They can keep trying to cram the machines down your throats, but they can't make you believe the results are legitimate. This is not about any particular election, by the way. What I really want to do is I want you to understand the voting machines are creating the election. And there's a lot of confusion about that, and we're going to go through that today. The election machines, I'm going to show you, they're going to tell you themselves that they are being preloaded with votes. I'm going to show you, and the machines are going to tell you that they have algorithms to create and switch votes within them. Creation of ballots for created fake voters. We're going to talk a little bit about, the machines are going to show you that. QR and barcodes that switch votes. We're going to talk a little bit about, I'm going to show you evidence of all of this. And the swapping votes, removing votes, injecting votes at the voting stage, the tabulation stage, etc. And what you need to understand is that every computer in every precinct in every county can be manipulated. And we're going to show you how that happens, because it can happen a number of ways. So what got us going? Well, this is a little snapshot from the original logs that we saw in 2018. And the election, well, early voting ended on the 2nd, and the election was on the 6th. Now notice this is the 5th, the day before the election. And what you're seeing is that they are collecting all the votes, they're doing their reports and research, and then they're wiping out the database. And then they're reloading votes from somewhere else. Here they clear it, and now they start to reload it. And here they clear it, and they start to reload it right up into the morning of the election. It happened 4 times between the end of early voting and the start of election day. And the reason it happened 4 times is because as the results kept coming in from all over the country, they kept having to change how many votes they were putting into the computer before election day. That's what happens between the end of early voting and election day. That's why early voting is a terrible idea. Okay? But we look more in the logs and we began to see timestamp mismatch. Now what does that mean? Well, your device has to sync up within a reasonable time frame to the server it goes to, or it won't talk to it. If you try to log on to whatever your network is and your device says it's Tuesday at 3 o'clock and it's actually Monday at 1 o'clock, it won't let you connect. What this is telling you is that you have a big timestamp mismatch, which is telling you that all these votes are coming from somewhere completely outside of this election system. That's what it's telling you. And then it says, well, by the way, the votes exceed the ballots. Now, the guy that was running this was an ES&S employee, and he says, I don't care, accept it anyway. So now we have 120 ballots, 120 votes. Here we have 529 ballots and 537 votes. In this precinct, we have 1,200 ballots, but we have 1,219 votes. It's telling you. Right here in black and white, it is confessing and testifying to everybody in this room, this was a lie, a cheat, and a steal. It's just black and white. And it just goes on, and it goes on, and it goes on. These are all precincts that they're telling you are cheating. Okay? So how do you really rig an election? Well, first you got to decide who you want to have win, right? Then you got to forecast how many votes are going to be needed to win the election, both in early voting and on election day. Then you use the electronic poll books, which, by the way, are cloud-based, if you don't know that, to create an inventory of fake voters. And I want to be clear about this. You don't actually need ballots. You don't even need real voters. You just need an inventory of voters that kind of adds up to the same number of votes the machines create. And we're going to have the machines talk to you about that. Then you preload enough votes into the voting machines to beat the forecast. And you erase the computer logs that showed you doing that. And I'm going to show you a couple of instances where the machines are going to show you in black and white that's exactly what happened to them. You're going to program in algorithms to create, switch, erase, or change the votes in the voting machines. You're going to use electronic poll books to track how the election's going compared to forecast and see if your forecast is wrong and therefore you need to go back and do course corrections. That's what we were seeing in those logs during the election. We were seeing some course corrections because their forecast was wrong. And at the end of the day, you just inject votes on election day. If you have no other choice and you're behind, you shut down the election. You claim that you're going to start counting again in about 3 or 4 hours. And in that time, you inject a massive number of votes. And you can use a reporting system to change the election and then adjust the database upstream or downstream. We'll talk what that means. So let's talk about what really is in the voting system, because these are the people who are going to testify to you. We have poll books. and they're going to give you a little testimony here. We have scanners and tabulators. That's what you take your ballot right here and you feed it in to the scanner and tabulator. Then you have in downtown, you have an election management server. And this is really kind of the controlling software. This is where all of the precincts report into. It puts it all together. And then from there, it sends it to a company called Clarity Cytal. Now, we talked a lot about Clarity Cytal in 2018, 2019, and 2020. That's what got the FBI really mad at us. It got the CIA mad at us because there are a whole lot of connections to Cytal that go back to the CIA's venture capital company. So, by the way, Cytal is not an American company. And you may have heard, did you all remember that story about the server in Frankfurt that supposedly the U.S. military did? I'm here to tell you I was on the inside of that in a major way. And that server was there. Someone did take it down because we were watching it at the time for certain reasons. But it wasn't the U.S. military. I have no idea who it was, but it did happen. And I'm going to prove it to you that it's there. Anyway, the reason these guys are important is because if everybody reports to them, they also have a little piece of equipment in their network called QSnatch, and it goes back and it gets the passwords and the votes and the databases and everything from every single one of these in the country that report to it, so that if it wants to, it can go back and download back in to your own election management server in Harris County or Dallas or wherever. But this is how it's all connected. Now let me show you that again. Supposedly this is this system that is not connected to the internet. That's what's the reality. These all talk to the check-in through the cloud. Now this is a cellular network, but between every two cell towers there is what's called a mobile switching station. That's where your cellular network intersects the internet. So you see, it is all connected. It's absolutely all connected. And you know that's true because if you take your smartphone right there, whatever browser you want, flip on it, and you can get on the internet. How do you do it? Well, it goes through the cell tower to the mobile switching station to the internet. It's all connected. And of course, balloting results go all through this system. So there's lots of opportunity to play with it, and we're going to get into some of that. I'm going to only spend just a second on these guys because, as I say, in 2018 and 19 and 20, I spent so much time on them. Because in the beginning, we thought those were the major bad guys. Now they're just somewhat of the bad guys. And then we're going to talk just a little bit about an Albert censure and CIS and CISA, because they're in the middle of this game too, and they are part of the corruption. How do you know that Cytal, Clarity are involved? Well, it's real simple. This happens to be what looks like the Dallas website, reporting website. But notice, you're not really on Dallas County anymore. When you ask to see results on the Dallas County website, this comes up and it says Clarity Elections. You're on Clarity Elections site because that's where all the results are held and controlled and can be changed and can be downloaded back into Dallas if need be. How do you know that they've got a server in Frankfurt, Germany? Well, there's a little program called NSLookup. You can put it in your browser, and you can say NSLookup www.cytal.com. And if you do that, you'll find that this is their IP address. It'll give it to you. So then you plug that IP address in to NSLookup, and it'll tell you that it's in the EU, and it will tell you that it's in the Amazon AWS cloud. And then you can go into a different little program in your browser called GeoIP Lookup. And when you do that, it'll show you that that server is actually in Frankfurt am Main, Germany. So it wasn't speculation. It was just proof. It's like looking in the phone book and seeing that your phone number starts in 972 or whatever. Same thing on the internet if you know what the phone book looks like. So that's clarity. And that's a problem because, as you see, they have connections to the internet. They have connections to the cell tower. The other ones we need to know about is this thing called an Albert sensor. Now, an Albert sensor was actually invented by the NSA. And it was invented by them as part of what was called Project Einstein. Hence, the Albert sensor. Some of these guys, this is what passes for a sense of humor among some cyber people. Anyway, the point is, what it was supposed to be was what's called a passive sniffer. And that is a little device you put on your network, and all it does is look for bad people getting in there and warn you about it. But the Albert sensor does a whole lot more than that. The Albert sensor actually collects all the data on the network. So that I believe Harris County is connected to an Albert sensor. And if Harris County happens to keep a list of everybody who has a concealed handgun permit, the people who monitor the Albert sensor also have that list of who has a concealed handgun permit in Houston, Texas. Pretty handy when you get ready to go get the guns, right? That's what's there. Your credit card, do you pay for your lawn bill by your credit card? These people have your credit card. So Albert sensors are a bad deal. They work just like the Russian Advanced Persistent Threat tool that penetrated Colonial Pipeline. You remember that deal? And it's operated by a private left-wing company out of New York called CIS, and they are a contractor to CISA. But the point of having these guys do it instead of CISA is that you can't FOIA them.
You can't what?
FOIA them. You cannot do a FOIA request of an NGO, only of a government entity. So it was a way to make sure that you can't do it. And by the way, there are 3,500 counties in the United States right now that have an Albert sensor. Okay, now, there are vulnerabilities in every stage of an election, and now we're going to get these machines to start testifying to you. You have the whole registration, check-in validation, process, tabulation, et cetera, et cetera. And what I want you to understand today is that we're going to draw a line right down here. Here's your poll book. Here's your ballot. What I want you to understand is that this is just cover. This is, if you would, the symptom. This is the malignancy on your skin, and by cutting it out, you don't get rid of the cancer that's invaded your body. You just get rid of what's on the surface. That's what all this stuff is. Does it matter that you have bad poll books and you have bad voters? Absolutely it does, because it helps create cover. It would help to get rid of that cover, but that's not going to fix your problem. And the reason is, here's your scanner tabulator, here's your election management server, here's CITL, here's really the Albert sensor, here's all that, that's all there. But the whole point is, this is where the theft is created. And this theft can be created without any of these people or any of these ballots. And I'm going to show you that. Because the machines, this machine is going to testify to you, this machine is going to testify to you, and this machine is going to testify to you. So let's see what they have to say. Well, first off, we're going to have the poll book talk to you. This happens to be a little study we did for you in Harris County this year. This was in the 2024 election. You had 145,643 people who don't even live in Harris County who voted in early voting. Now, we've called a few of them, and none of them yet have been willing to say that they voted in Harris County. And that's probably because some of them live in Maine, some of them live in Delaware, some of them live in Nebraska. They didn't come to Harris County to vote. Mail-in, 5,970. Election day, 46,000. Total of 197,788 people voted who do not even live in Harris County. And at the end of the day, the good news is we're only 51 dead people we found actually voted in your election. So I guess the number of Democrats is decreasing. Anyway, 292,216 that we can identify voted in your election and were illegal voters. But they were on your voter rolls. So how did they get there? Well, we had to talk to the poll books a little more to find out. You need to understand there's a poll book provider. And that provider creates the database of who are supposedly your legitimately registered voters. And when the election starts, they upload that into the cloud. Now, at that point, your county has no more visibility into that list of people. So it can be added to, changed, subtracted, whatever. The poll books, however, are connected to it. And so whoever is operating this poll book can see whether that's supposedly a legitimate voter and is in the cloud or not. On the same network as your scanner tabulator. So now we have a very interesting network getting set up. Voters can be added by the internet into this cloud database. Voters can be added via the cellular network into that cloud. You can even have an internal algorithm, and there's a guy out in New York, a very interesting guy, who's done a whole study and discovered the algorithms that are used in some of these voter databases. And I don't want to get into the weeds here, but basically what he really does is he looks for gaps in your registration number. And you can see certain patterns of gaps between, say, 1004 and 1008 and 1012, etc. And you can see these people get created by the poll book themselves. Now, it also turns out that it doesn't have to all be at the front end. It can even be during an election. We did a little operation in Dallas. This was in 2020. And we started tracking because every day they list everybody who supposedly voted. So because we're the obnoxious people we kept downloading those and built a system where we could then track how a voter went. And what we found was very interesting. Mr. Edward Jimenez Gonzalez, state ID voter number, voted by mail. The ballot was mailed to him on August 29th. He returned it on September 26th. It was reported on October 6th, and the next day it was gone. And in fact, the next day, late that afternoon, it reappeared. And same thing. Notice all that looks the same, but that creates a second vote. So now he's voted twice. He was purged on October 20th. And late October 20th, he appeared a third time. And this time it's interesting because the ballot was supposedly mailed totally different days than these, and it was returned a totally different day. You might be interested to know that there were 56,974 instances of this happening in Dallas, Texas in 2020 in early voting.
This is just one technique. It's ballot duplication.
Yep, just one. Okay? Funny is that after having passed through Cital Clarity, because they're the ones who report to the SOS what the votes are, Cital Clarity says this guy reported on October 4th, which doesn't match any of these. Same thing, same thing, same thing. You can't make this up. Okay? Now, in 2022, we had trained a bunch of poll watchers. And so here is, if you would, a poll book. And I wish you could see it, but it's Tuesday, November 8th. This is Election Day at 6:44 p.m. And there are 528 voters that checked in that day on this poll book. Okay? Now, the polls close at 6:44. The polls are going to close in 16 minutes. Let's look at this poll book a few minutes later. Now it's 7:15, not 6:44. And suddenly there's 1,700 voters, not 528, 1,700 voters that supposedly have checked in. And guess what? The poll workers themselves said nobody was in the polling place between 6:44 and 7:15. By the time the night was over, there were over 2,680 voters. And all of them were phantom. Now, what screwed up, and this is sort of funny because hackers make mistakes. This really wasn't supposed to start climbing until 8 o'clock when the poll books had already been shut down and packed away. But what happened was daylight savings time. And they got it wrong. And what was supposed to start at 8 o'clock automatically started at 7. And so they were able to see it. Okay? But here's the poll books just testifying to you, telling you what's happening. Preloaded votes and vote flipping. How do you preload votes? Well, what happens is, every precinct has a different ballot because you have different things in every precinct that matter. And so that ballot has to be designed precinct by precinct, and then a small device like a USB device has that on it, and it gets put into a scanner tabulator so that it can read that ballot that gets put into it. The problem is that USB device can add a whole lot more than that, including preloaded votes. And I'm going to have at least 2 different counties testify to you. The scanner tabulators are going to testify to you and show you that actually happened. You can also have it triggered, however, by the QR code on a ballot. You can't see what's on the QR code. That QR code could say exactly how you voted, but it could also add, oh, and by the way, in race 1, 7, and 9, add 100,000 ballots. You can't read it.
What is the point of the QR code?
To make sure you can't tell how you really voted. Supposedly, it's designed so that the computer can more easily and consistently read it. It's all for the convenience of the computer, but it makes it totally unauditable for you. If you take a ballot and you look at how that ballot was voted, if you could find that ballot in the machine, which you sort of can, you're not supposed to, but you sort of can, don't be surprised that the machine didn't register it the same way you voted it.
Just because of the QR code.
QR code. Yeah. Okay, so I told you I was going to have the machines prove to you that they're being preloaded. This is Dallas. And what we did is that we were able to get what are called the cast vote records of all of the ballots that went through. And when we got them in a series of 9 Excel files. And we noticed that the very first one started at 100,000. And it went through 199,998. So in other words, there were 99,999 cast vote records in this file. And then the same thing in the next. Very last file, there were only 18,504. That was the end. Total of 818,496 records in the computer, according to the ballots that passed through there. Remember that number. And the reason I want you to remember it is because they actually canvassed 926,000. Now, we saw there were 818,000. The difference is about 108,000, which, by the way, is the difference between what got preloaded, because they said this is the first file, and it wasn't. There were obviously about 100,000 ballots preloaded before this ever started registering ballots passing through it. That's what you're seeing. This happens to be in Mesa County, Colorado. We ran the forensics for Tina Peters. The woman is a total heroine. She has no business being anywhere near jail. She has been made an example of, and frankly, would not be in jail. Would not be in jail if the original legal team and the original forensic team had continued. But there was a person who made a deal with either the DA or the FBI, we don't know, to get rid of the original legal team and the forensic team. And the very day that the sponsor got rid of them, that evening the DA did an emergency session of the grand jury and indicted Tina Peters on 10 counts. And it was supposedly one of the people on our team that fired that legal team and then hired horrible legal team, and that's why she's in jail today. But the point is, in Tabulator 10, which was looking only at mail-in ballots, Colorado is a state where 90% of the voting was done on mail-in. Mesa County is 78% red historically. In the first 31 seconds of the election, the logs told us it counted 914 ballots in 31 seconds. Think about how long it took your ballot to go through the scanner tabulator when you fed it in. Can you do 914 of those in 31 seconds?
No.
Did they even have 900 machines?
No, this is one machine. This is only Tabulator 10.
Even worse.
Yeah, this is only Tabulator 10. In fact, under perfect circumstances, this is actually physically how many ballots it could have counted. So all of these were preloaded. So we said, great, let's go back and trace where those came from. What was interesting is that all that history ends up in the adjudication database. And in Mesa County, and then, by the way, the votes go into the master database. Now, the votes are here, but the history of how they got there is here. On day 3 of early voting, that database suddenly failed. That database failed. And new databases were automatically formed by the machine. And those 5,000 ballots, history was gone. It didn't get recreated somehow. What kind of a computer doesn't recreate when it has a failure the same database? It shouldn't. We're now going to go and we're going to let some of the scanner tabulators and the EMS machine and the reporting system all talk to you. This was a little op that was kind of interesting. This is a race, and there's 3 candidates. Gonzalez, who, by the way, Greg Abbott wanted, and a guy named Lira, who was a Democrat, and a guy named Lopez. Now, it's November 8th. It's at 8:23 p.m., and you'll see that Lira and Lopez had the exact same number of votes, 37,002. This is a screenshot. We had computers set up all around the room watching this race. So this is a screenshot of Bexar County. Brewster County, it's 8:23, exact same time. And oh wow, Lira and Lopez each have 1,125 ballots.
What?
They're again exactly tied.
Come on, man.
So this is Crane County. It's at 8:23 p.m. and Lira and Lopez each have 66 votes each.
Oh, come on.
And if that's not enough fun for you, how about Loving County with the same problem at 8:23? How about Reagan County with the exact same problem at 8:23? How about Sutton County at the exact same problem at 8:23? You don't think there's algorithms running this deal?
100%.
You're out of your mind. Anyway, are you getting the picture? There's Uvalde. And there's Zavala, just for good measure. All of them. Exact same time.
How many
I think we had 10 counties and 8 of them are right here at exactly the same. The other 2 were like tiny.
There's 254 counties in Texas.
Right. Yeah. We just had so many
Do we
computers.
know the number of counties using this electronic voting system?
Well, it doesn't matter because they're all pretty much the same. Yeah. ES&S and HART are the 2 major voting systems in this country, but it doesn't matter. They're all pretty much the same, and they're all built on what's called GEM software, which was the old George Soros Diebold system.
Okay.
Okay? Now, this was also interesting, and this is going to take a little bit of explanation, but this proves that there's an algorithm. Let me tell you what you're looking at. These are batches of 100 ballots over time. So as the early voting goes on, this is, like day 30 down here, and this is day 1. And what we have here is a graph of the ratio of cumulative votes for Trump versus Biden. Cumulative. So that by the time you get out here, you got a jillion ballots. And yet notice, that ratio suddenly seems to be very, very mathematical, except right here, and I'll explain that. And then it resumes that same unbelievable, impossible ratio. What this is the same thing as is if you own a Suburban and you go and fill it up with gas, and you notice the first time you get 18 miles a gallon. But by the time you fill it up the 3rd time, your overall average is 21. By the time you fill it up the 8th time, your overall average is 30. By the time you fill it up the 15th time, you're getting 60 miles per gallon average. That's what this is telling you. The ratio of votes, Trump to Biden, should flatten out. It's called the law of large numbers, but it doesn't. It keeps rising. We interviewed one of the clerks and says, "What's that about?" They couldn't figure it out. They thought that, that's the day tabulator 4 broke. And as soon as it got back online, right here, it ended up. Now, just to make it even more fun, these are the 3 early voting tabulators. And you'll notice they all just track each other beautifully, impossibly, but beautifully. This is the 10% of the voters that actually voted in person. And look at the difference in the ratio between what these computers created and what actually happened with real voters. It's impossible. Totally impossible. But even more fun than that is we looked at other races. This happened to be the Soper, Slave, and Edmund race was in blue. This is the ratio of Soper to Slave and Edmund. This is the ratio of Trump to Biden. And you'll notice, except for the fact that the presidential had 88,000 voters and the Senate race only had 39,800, when you align the graph charts, you'll find that the lines fit right on top of each other. All of which are impossible lines. All of which they're all algorithmically created by the machine. It makes no difference the ballots that were fed through there. And by the way, you're not allowed to see the ballots. We found those same impossible patterns in all of these counties using different machines. ES&S was in Hillsborough, Florida. Basically, we found about 40 counties, and then we quit doing the research. We just had, so many other things to look at. But the point is that is an absolutely impossible ratio, obviously, unless you really believe that by the time you fill your Suburban up the 80th time, you're going to be getting an average of 85 miles per gallon. If you find that to be believable, then you can certainly believe this. Okay, vote injections and vote switching. How does that happen? Well, votes can be injected here. Votes can be injected here. Votes can be injected here. Can go through the cell tower. All of those are pathways to inject votes back here. This is what was going on in Detroit. This is what was going on in Fulton County. This is what's going on in Maricopa. It's what we found when we did the audit in Antrim County, Michigan, that first blew the lid off this and made the liberals go crazy. How does this really look in real life? Well, they tamper with your election right down to dog catcher, because these are computers. They can tamper in any election. It really doesn't cost that much more to tamper with dog catcher than president. So here's an example. This is actually in the Democrat primary. We find that they tend to practice in the Democrat primaries where they're kind of out of sight, and then they employ it into the general election. So this was for District 2 County Commissioner. Michelle Longspear was the conservative, and Marshall Orson was the flaming liberal. He won. According to Dominion, 12,639 votes were cast. Michelle came third. She started looking at the results, precinct by precinct, looked at her precinct. She had no votes in her precinct.
Yeah.
She went, wait a minute. I voted for me. I'm pretty sure my husband voted for me. How did this happen? Called her campaign chairman. Said, how did it work in your precinct? She says, well, I don't know. Let me look. Wait a minute. You didn't get any votes in my precinct either. I voted for you. So they went to the judge. And this poor judge, unsuspecting, said, well, maybe we need a recount. So they did. They did a full hand recount where they scored all the ballots by hand. Guess what? There weren't 12,639 votes. There were actually 15,449 votes. And by the way, Michelle ends up winning,
Wow.
and the guy who supposedly won ends up being third. The machines are creating your elections all the way down to dog catcher. This was sort of a fun one. This is another Democrat primary. This guy challenged Mark Vesey, who is a flaming liberal up in our part, Marxist. And he keeps winning. And the New York Times reported, though, that Segura actually won, got 83% of the votes. Well, we looked at that and we went, wait, that can't be. That's too many voters. That's way too many voters. By that night, they had done an update. And instead of Segura having 106,843, there was a very believable 13,501, and he'd lost 36.6. But the New York Times had just reported what the election system told them. And what was interesting is, you notice Segura got 36.6? Guess what the previous challenger, whose name is Carlos Quintanilla, got against Mark Vesey? 36.6. They didn't even bother to change the algorithm. They just rigged it the same way. Impossible. Okay. We also did an investigation in a Kentucky race, and it was a very interesting race where Matt Bevin lost. All the other top Republicans at the top of the ticket. This is the margin of victory, not total votes. This is the margin of victory. And yet, Matt Bevin lost. Mitch McConnell hates Matt Bevin, by the way. And so we went and we got all 5 hours of, among other things, of CNN's coverage. And this is the live feed on CNN from Sidle Clarity. What you see down here is CNN's updates based on what they're getting from Sidle Clarity. Now I want to show you something, because what's going to happen is you're going to see an update happen really quickly, and then this guy's face fills the screen, and then I'm going to go back and show you what you missed. Let's see here. Okay, there's the update, and there's this guy. Okay, now let me put on my glasses because this gets to be pretty heavy duty here. And I'm going to show you in slow motion what you missed from sidle clarity. Okay, so right now Andy Bashir has 673,948, both from sidle clarity and down below at CNN. Matt Bevan has 662,235, both from sidle clarity up above and down below at CNN. Now, watch as we move this forward. Here comes the update right here. Okay? Now, CNN hadn't had a chance to update yet. Bashir now has 674,508. He did have 673,948, so he gained 500, what is that, 540 votes, something like that. Matt Bevan has 661,675. Oh, wait a minute ago he had 662,235. Do the math.
We saw that happen too.
Andy Bashir got the exact same number of votes that Matt Bevan lost. How does that happen? Well, obviously it can't in a legitimate voting system. Okay, well, let's move along. We also saw possible turnout percentages. These were some of the precinct turnout percentages. Anybody here who's ever been a precinct chair enjoy 140% turnout? Not too often. This is that vote injection we talked about. This is actually one of the charts. You've probably seen this. My team created this. This was the vote injection for Biden in the middle of the night when they quit counting in Michigan. This was Georgia. I've got for 6 counties all those sorts of things. And then this was just a little bit of the vulnerabilities that the machines told us about in Mesa County. We found that the machines had been opened up worldwide for intruders. All the firewalls were opened up to accept an IP address from anywhere in the world. We found hidden files in there from Serbia. We found hidden files from there from the U.S. Army. Interesting what they were doing. We found that the audit logs, in a lot of cases, were destroyed purposefully. We found that they had allocated so little space on the disk to audit logs that basically every day the new log was overwriting the day before, so that by the time the election was over, you only had one day. All the rest of them were gone. We found wireless devices that were all talking. And interestingly enough, we found Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio, which was illegal software. It's designed for a database manager to go in and manipulate a database without creating a log. Perfect license to steal. You say, yeah, but these are certified. Not really. This happens to be, let's see. Here is ES&S used in Texas. It was last certified in 2022, but it's using standards from 2005.
We have that first one, right? Verity is hard.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't it? Verity is hard. That's what we have in Harris County.
Yeah, and you know what? They were also tested using 2005 standards. Now, your cell phones didn't exist in 2005. We were still dealing with flip phones in 2005. And yet that's the safety standard that they are using to certify these machines as being safe and secure. None of these issues even existed in 2005. We also found, just like in Colorado, here in Texas, there was a very conscious effort to use software updates that would overwrite all the logs and all the election records, which, by the way, is a federal crime. So we sent out inquiries to every county in Texas and said, hey, we'd like to see, something like your cast vote records. I have hundreds of these emails back from various counties basically saying, oh, well, they did a software update and they wiped out our election records. Can't give them to you. So here you have, I mean, this lady doesn't realize it. She has just confessed to a federal felony. This was in Columbus, Texas. Our electionware was updated. Since the 2020 election, the CVR files are not available. When it's upgraded to a new version, all the elections are lost and the hard drives are wiped before installing and hardening the new version. Would you like to see one from Bellevue, Texas? Same story. The electionware was updated. All of this is, by the way, being updated during that period of time when by federal law, you're supposed to preserve all your records. And it's the voting companies doing it. Okay? So here was another one. I could go on and on. The point is, until we fix the problem of voting machines, everything you care about is downstream from that. I'm a Second Amendment guy. I happen to be a pro-life guy. But it doesn't matter, because until we fix this problem, it's all downstream. And 2028 is coming. Opaque private companies, some of whom are foreign, are running your elections. How's that going on? Are you aware that all of Dominion's programmers are based in Belgrade, Serbia?
No, I did not know that.
We have all 32 of their programmers' names and email addresses as they existed in 2019. The only thing you can do is have paper ballots that are hand marked and then hand counted. That is the only auditable system. I can play a game with you in a computer forever, and you will never find enough ways to patch enough holes that I won't find another one to go in. And that's what I really wanted you to understand today. Clay Parikh, who's one of the guys that's worked for us at times, he was asked on the stand, how long would it take you to hack into the ES&S system? He said, I think my best time was about 2.5 minutes, but on average it was usually 5 to 10 minutes, and it really didn't matter on the vendor. So who is Clay Parikh? How well qualified is he? Well, he's the lead information systems security officer for the ground missile defense system in the United States, Northrop Grumman. He was the deputy cyber manager for the Army Corps of Engineers, Lockheed Martin, and he did testing on voting systems for 9 years. This man knows what a joke these systems are, like nobody knows it. I think this is very apt. History speaks to those who choose to just sit on the sidelines. They were so weak, they allowed everything to happen, to be done to them. That is how contempt is born. I could never understand how they could just give in as they did. That's Franz Stangel's views expressed at his trial regarding the more than 900,000 Jews he processed at Treblinka concentration camp. This is where we've been. What's different today is that through a God-given miracle, we have an opportunity now to do something besides just dig in your purse for Valium or go have a martini. What happened in this last election? If the voting machines are really corrupt, how did we win? Well, first off, last January, a year ago, January, we made a prediction. We said it's going to be one of 4 scenarios. Either they're going to put him in jail, or they're going to kill him, or they're going to put another candidate in instead of Biden that could possibly get close enough in the polls that if they steal it, they could steal it again. But they're going to make sure that everybody else is 5 to 8 points below him, and that they hold Trump to about a 3 or 4 point lead, so that all those other down ballot Republicans will lose, and Trump won't have a Senate, and he won't have a House.
But he does.
He'll be a 4-year lame duck. Well, what happened? Well, you remember how I told you that they look at early voting and they make projections as to what they have to do then for election day in terms of rigging? Here's what happened. They cheated so much in 2018 and 2020 and 2022, they destroyed their own baseline. Their numbers were no good. And Trump, when they finally decided to let Pennsylvania go, to their horror, they saw so many votes flow in that even if you were 5 to 8 points below Trump, by the way, you know, Ted Cruz was 5 points below Trump, right? Here in Texas. Do you really believe that 5% of Texans voted for Trump and then voted for Colin Aldred?
No.
Well, you're supposed to.
Really hard to steal it from.
So that's the whole point. Trump won by more than the 4 to 5% beatable margin, and it drug just enough guys across the finish line with him that we got the Senate, we got the House in a squeaker, and we've got something to work with. But we got to do something now because 2028 is coming. And if we're still voting on these machines in 2028, it's going to be really, really ugly.
Our local elections are so important. If we don't get these counties back,
Yep.
we can hang it up. We
Yep.
lost our counties.
Okay, well, that's all the happiness that I had for you today.